You've seen the image, right? A confused, disheveled Saddam Hussein just pulled from a hole in the ground. But here's the thing. That picture, that's the end of the story. We're going to unpack the beginning, the absolutely incredible intelligence operation that led U.S. forces to that one exact spot.
So those were the first words he spoke. Picture it. December 2003, in a little town in Iraq called Ad-Dawr, a pair of hands just appears out of a hole in the ground, and a man surrenders. But that begs the question, and it's a huge one. Out of every single possible hiding spot in the entire country, how on earth did they know to look right there?
To get that answer, we really need to set the scene. It's the dead of night in this small rural village. And then, suddenly, all the streetlights just go out. Hundreds of U.S. soldiers start swarming a seemingly random farmhouse. So, as the troops are searching, one soldier spots it. Just a piece of rope, kind of half buried in the dirt. And it leads to a trap door, camouflaged with a piece of styrofoam. Now, protocol is protocol. They open it up and get ready to toss a grenade inside to clear it out. But right as the pin is about to be pulled, a pair of hands comes up, and the entire raid just comes to a stunning halt. So, how did they get to this exact farmhouse? To really understand that, we have to rewind the clock. 9 months, all the way back to the very start of the war. Okay, so back in March of 2003, a US-led coalition invades Iraq. The main reason they gave at the time was that Saddam was hiding weapons of mass destruction, a claim that, was later proven to be false. The invasion itself? It was incredibly fast. Baghdad fell in just 3 weeks. But while the whole regime was collapsing and that famous statue was being pulled down, Saddam himself had just vanished.
The hunt was officially on. And to help soldiers identify all the top officials, the military got pretty creative. They actually designed and handed out this special deck of playing cards, with each card featuring one of the 52 most wanted members of the regime. The idea was pretty simple. Soldiers play cards all the time, so they'd get familiar with the faces. And the number one target, the ace of spades, was of course Saddam Hussein himself.
But those first few months after Baghdad fell were, well, intensely frustrating. The hunt for the ace of spades was going absolutely nowhere. It was just one dead end after another. So to try and get a good lead, the U.S. offered up a staggering amount of money. We're talking $15 million for Saddam's son Uday and another $15 million for his other son Qusay. The hope was that a combined $30 million bounty would be just too tempting for anyone to pass up. And you know what? It worked. An informant walks onto a military base and reveals that Saddam's sons are hiding out in his home in Mosul. Troops immediately surround the mansion, a massive firefight kicks off, and they even call in a missile strike. When it was all over, both Uday and Qusay were dead. It was a huge victory, for sure, but it didn't actually get them any closer to finding Saddam. There was also a separate $25 million bounty on Saddam's head. But that created a whole new problem, just a flood of bad intelligence. With that much cash on the line, tips were pouring in from everywhere, and it led to all these frantic, destructive raids on innocent people's homes. The military was just spinning its wheels, causing chaos, and getting no closer at all. The search was failing, plain and simple. With all these high-profile raids leading to absolutely nothing, the entire approach had to change. And this right here is the turning point in the whole story, and it's all thanks to the insight of one staff sergeant. Staff Sergeant Eric Maddox, he asked a really simple but profound question. Why wasn't any of this working? The military was so focused on hunting down the high-ranking officials from that deck of cards, but they just kept coming up empty-handed. And here it is, this was Maddox's key insight. The deck of cards was full of politicians from a government that didn't exist anymore, people whose power came from Saddam. But with the government gone, Saddam didn't need a minister of agriculture. He needed protectors. Maddox basically theorized that Saddam would only trust one group of people, the Hamaya. This was the innermost, most elite circle of his personal bodyguards. These were the guys who were with him 24/7, the guys who would absolutely be the ones hiding him now. The hunt for politicians was over. The hunt for the Hamaya had just begun. See, Saddam's security was basically set up in 3 tiers. You had your outer guards for places like palaces, then you had middle guards for when he was traveling, and then at the very center you had the Hamaya. Maddox's new strategy was to completely ignore the first 2 layers and focus every single resource on finding this tiny, super trusted inner circle. So with this new focus, Maddox basically turns into a detective. He's putting together this incredibly complex puzzle, one interrogation at a time. This wasn't about raids anymore. This was about connecting the dots.
So Maddox's team starts building out this network. They zeroed in on Saddam's hometown, to Crete, but not to find Saddam. No, they were looking for the al-Muslat family, the clan that supplied most of his Hamaya bodyguards. And one name kept coming up again and again, Muhammad Ibrahim. He was a top bodyguard who is now believed to be running the whole resistance. So they started pulling on that thread, interrogating his associates, his driver, even his son. The net was closing in.
And the real breakthrough, it came from this tiny, seemingly insignificant detail. Ibrahim's son mentioned that his father still went fishing at a pond he owned. Now, that sounds like nothing, right? But Maddox remembered something from an earlier interrogation with one of Saddam's old housekeepers. She had mentioned that Saddam's favorite meal was mazgoof, which is a specific type of fish. And just like that, the trail went from ice cold to red hot. So they followed this whole chain of weak links, from the son to the fish farm to a fisherman to that fisherman's uncle, and they decided to raid this house in Baghdad. It was a total long shot, but you won't believe it. Inside, they found their man. Muhammad Ibrahim, the key to the entire puzzle, was finally captured.
And with the capture of Muhammad Ibrahim, well, the whole story comes full circle. We are right back at that farmhouse in Ad-Dawr. But this time, we know exactly how the soldiers got there.
So Muhammad Ibrahim, now their prisoner, was actually with the troops during the raid. He pointed out 2 different farmhouses, but they searched and turned up nothing. The soldiers were about to give up. But Ibrahim, maybe he just couldn't bring himself to be the one to directly give Saddam away. So he just started kicking at a piece of rope that was half buried in the ground. The soldiers finally understood.
But the story didn't actually end with the capture. What happened next was a battle of images. Saddam had spent decades building this huge cult of personality. So the US military very strategically dismantled that myth. They publicized photos of him looking frail. They took journalists on tours of his miserable little hiding place. And they even released video of a public medical exam. It was all a very deliberate effort to erase that image of the powerful dictator.
And this really brings us to the final takeaway. The capture of Saddam Hussein wasn't just a military operation. It was a carefully managed story. That iconic image of the man in the hole wasn't an accident. It was a message. And it leaves us with a pretty powerful question. When we look back at history, whose version of the story are we really seeing?